Welcome to Ask GCN, where we are here to answer your questions about professional cycling.
That's right. They are pretty much all about professional cycling this week. So let's start with the first one, which is from Oliver Brookwell, who asks, at what age is it too late to try and become a professional cyclist? What do you reckon, Emma?
Well, there is probably technically no limit, but let's just say that statistically, for most guys, they start in their teens racing pretty seriously.
Yeah.
But that does depend. I mean, there have been cases of people who started a lot later. So I started racing in my 20s, and quite a few women, for instance, Kristen Armstrong started in her 20s as well, and she got 3 Olympic gold medals. So it's not impossible.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I think as well, some male pro cyclists particularly maybe start racing BMX or something like that when they're 7 or 8 and progress from there. Some start racing on the road at 15, 16, and others, Greg Van Avermaet was quite famously quite a late starter. He was actually a goalkeeper for a Belgian football team. That was his first kind of foray into high-level sport before he became one of the best cyclists of his generation. So it's not worth worrying about it.
No,
I know.
I think a lot of people who get into the sport later have come from other elite sports because they have a background in high performance and training hard. I guess the question is, you need obviously a certain amount of physical talent, and you also need a lot of time learning how to race to become a professional cyclist, because it's more than just about riding your bike fast. There's an awful lot to learn.
I think as well, I think the thing is that it's a fantastic aim to try and become a professional cyclist, but obviously we think cycling is a great thing, and if you want to do it, you should just do it. And if, many pro cyclists, we did a count earlier of how many riders there are on the World Tour at the moment, and I think it was 481.
Exactly. Yeah.
481 across 18 teams. Most of those riders will not have, they've had fantastic careers because they are at the top level of their sport in the world, but they're not going to have a lot of wins. They're not going to be big names which you may know, but they've had a professional cycling career and presumably they've enjoyed cycling. And so if you just want to ride a bike and see where it goes, I think you should start off by doing that.
Yeah, so I guess what we're trying to say is it's not the wrong question, but it's maybe the wrong angle on the question. If you want to know, it's hard to start off with the aim of being a professional cyclist and wanting to get there. That's kind of a cool aim, but you should really be focusing on trying to be a better cyclist if you want to be a pro and see how far it takes you. And when you start winning races, then you can start worrying about giving up your day job and being a professional cyclist. Go out, ride your bike first and enjoy it, and race and try and be good.
Yeah, good.
Probably have to do some intervals.
Be good, do intervals, win, then become pro.
Go to bed early, don't drink beer, all those things.
Swear, where I went. Right, next up, we've got one from Michael McDermott, which we can read out. Thanks, Michael. He says, I'd like a video about tactics, etc. I'd love to hear the pros talking about this kind of thing, racecraft and stuff like that. Well, like Emma was saying, Michael, that's such a huge part of becoming a pro cyclist that it's definitely something we should look into.
Yep, we should do some more. I think we've done some in the past, some videos about race tactics.
And Dan's particularly good at that sort of stuff. So
when Dan talks about racing, you should definitely listen.
He's a nerd.
He knows his stuff.
Stephen Haley, what is a typical training week for a cyclist before and during the season? That is a difficult question.
That is like saying how long is a piece of string. It depends on the cyclist a lot. Yeah.
I think it's easy. Well, it's easier to answer if we say, let's say you're racing on a Sunday during the season. You're probably going to have Monday as a recovery day. You're probably going to have Saturday as a pretty chilled day, possibly even Friday as a chilled day.
Yeah.
So your training's going to be Tuesday through Thursday.
Yep. And it depends whether the race is important as to whether you train hard. So probably anything between, Matt used to race and win off 7 hours training a week. Yeah. That's probably the minimum in the season. But then I think a lot of people would do a lot more hours when it's not the race season.
Yeah, so I guess during the season you've probably got, if you include your race day, if you're racing 1 day a week, you've probably got like 4 days on, 3 days taking it a little bit easier, or maybe some of those easy days are totally off. Before the season, like Emma said, it's really difficult to work out the structure because most people's training structure is, if you've got a job, it's based around a weekend because that's when you can do the bulk of your training, but you still don't necessarily want to plan in 7-day blocks because that might be a bit restrictive. You maybe want to think in 3 days on, 1 day easier, and how does that fit around my work and weekend plans?
You think about your bigger the mesocycles as well. So maybe we should do a video on how to plan your
training explained with Emma, not with me.
Not with me. I think Dan would do that better. Okay. Let's give that one to Dan as well.
Another one for Dan. We're getting quite the list for Dan. Right.
Great.
Dave Fitzpatrick. How many miles will an average professional cyclist rack up during a career as a pro cyclist?
I have no idea.
They'd go several times around the earth, wouldn't they, at least?
Yeah, probably. This would be really cool for someone to investigate. There must be enough. There are quite a few pros who are public on Strava. Might be really interesting to see what they do in a year.
That's a statistics one, so that is for Emma.
Thought you did statistics.
Right. Okay, James Lotter. So James is asking about where to find information for live streams for races. And honestly, James, the best bet that you have is to go to the races website or the UCI site, because they list all of the TV providers in your area. And that kind of means that you're going the right way about it.
And if you can't find it, then watch the GCN Racing News Show on a Monday, because then you can catch up on everything.
Exactly.
And then we've got a question from Greg James. I'm not sure if this is a joke or not, but he's asking, how do you keep your hematocrit level under 50? And he says he's asking for a friend. Now, this is probably a joke, but it's actually quite a relevant question, because there are people who naturally have a very high hematocrit, and under the sort of the very rough system of trying to measure whether people are blood doping or not, they can actually get caught out. If your hematocrit is naturally 52, there was one point when the way things were measured, that would look like you were doping. They're a bit more subtle now with the blood biopassport. They're trying to measure your hematocrit over time, so they can see whether you have big fluctuations. But it is actually a relevant question. If you have a naturally high hematocrit, something that it's worth having tested before you start racing, in case you get caught out and people suspect you of taking EPO when naturally you're just a bit of a freak.
Yeah, I guess, it's particularly if you look at some of the riders who come from high altitude places, it's quite common that they would have a naturally high hematocrit, because that's an adaptation to living at higher altitude.
Yep.
So yeah, it's complex. I don't know how you would keep it down. I'd suggest you wouldn't do anything that would artificially raise it.
Yes, that was a bad idea. It's also not very good for you, and it's against the rules.
But yeah, lose. But if it's naturally higher, yeah, you just got to monitor it. Okay, good one in from Iliam Sangaku, Emma. He says, what do riders consider most important, Tour de France, World Championships or Olympics?
Well, I would love to think the Tour de France is the most important thing, but for women, we don't have one yet. So for female cyclists, road cyclists, I think the Olympics is the big one, because they're only every 4 years. But I think for male cyclists, probably the Tour de France is the big cheese, isn't it?
I guess it depends what kind of cyclist you are, because there are some riders who are never going to win the Tour de France, but the Olympics happens on a variety of courses, and therefore you may stand a chance at the Olympics. And the other thing that we were thinking that you can't underestimate about the Olympics is if you love cycling, you'll follow major races. So maybe Paris-Roubaix is your favourite race to watch of the year, so that's the one that matters most to you. But outside of our cycling bubble, the Olympics has such a huge impact for the population as a whole. As we've seen in Britain with cycling, it's become hugely popular, arguably as a result of massive Olympic success. So because of that, if the Olympics doesn't appear that important to you as a cycling fan, because it's just another race and there are other races which are equally as good to watch, it actually has a significantly broader impact for our sport as a whole, which I think makes it maybe more important. Yeah,
and I think that I certainly found that a lot of friends and family watched Olympic road races and had never watched a bike race before and probably haven't since, and they found it really exciting, not because I was in it, but just because a good road race is so exciting to watch, and it made them realise that cycling is not just what they thought it was, and so I think like Tom says, it brings cycling to a wider audience. So the Olympics is pretty special for that as well. But in terms of what a rider's value for winning, that's pretty personal. But I think to be honest, most people would be happy to win any of those three.
Now, Emma, I kind of like this question from John Burgess, but at the same time I don't like it. It says, why are pros allowed to litter?
Right. Well, first of all, they're not technically allowed to litter, and that I think they've changed the rules so that in a professional race you're supposed to throw your litter in a designated littering area around the feed zone and where it's all picked up. I think if people drop things by accident in a professional race, they won't normally get DQ'd, but essentially the UCI is trying to stop that bad example of people throwing gel wrappers and things away. And in the big races, there was always a clean-up team anyway that would come behind the race and make sure there was nothing left. And
it's one of my pet hates, actually, is not the pro racing side of things, because understand you're in a big bunch, and if you drop things, it kind of happens. But if you're cycling out in the lanes or on your local roads and you see rubbish which has obviously been dropped by a cyclist, so it's usually things like gel wrappers or energy bar wrappers, it just really annoys me. It shouldn't be, it isn't okay, and you shouldn't do it. And
it's no effort. If it's come out of your pocket, you've clearly got space to put it back in your pocket, the wrapper, and it is a tiny effort, and it's not okay to litter for anyone, professionals included. So I don't, technically not allowed to litter, allowed to chuck things in the clean-up zone. That's okay, and nobody should litter.
Yeah, and I think the other point on that is, as cyclists, we depend to a huge extent on having a really beautiful natural environment to go and ride our bikes in,
and the goodwill of people who live along the routes that we race and train on.
Just be cool and be nice and keep it nice. Right. What about Philip Johnson? Can you guys do another bike off where you each buy a bike and compete in challenges like you did before? That was awesome. Well, Philip, thank you for that, because it does give us an opportunity to throw to a couple of highlights of our recent eBay bike challenge. But it also gives us an opportunity to ask you, what challenge should we do next? Let us know in the comments below, and we will certainly see what we can do.
Within reason.
Within reason.
I can't see him. I'm at my limit. I can't see him. How has he done it? Oh God.
Dan tries an old motivational technique he uses when he races his own kids. It's called shouting.
Not in sight. Look. The big gap. The big gap.
Right, the next question is from BK6833, who asks, what's stopping the pro teams tapping into each other's radios? And that is a good question, because you could find out all sorts of tactical knowledge, and I'm pretty sure that some teams do it. I think when I raced, I had a director who used to try and listen in on other teams' radios, try and find their frequency, but I'm pretty sure that at the men's World Tour level, they'd have some kind of frequency lock to stop that.
I was worried that you were going to look at me for a technical opinion on it, because I just can't have one. I've no idea. I'd assume that maybe they try and do it to get an edge, but also you'd hope it's the sort of thing where there's at least some agreement or unwritten rule that you wouldn't try and do it. Because if everyone does it, the advantage of doing it and having radios kind of disappears.
I'm pretty sure some teams would try, and that some teams would be smart enough to kind of lock their comms system somehow.
I'm not smart enough to explain how they would try or lock it.
No, I don't know either. But I think it would cost a lot of money, so probably only the rich teams would lock theirs. And also, you wouldn't do it on the race radio in the team car, because then you wouldn't be able to hear your riders or talk to them. So you'd need a second radio system listening in and communicating with your team car. So it would be a big exercise, but I bet someone's doing it.
Yeah, you'd need another antenna and stuff like that.
Anyone who knows about this, let us know.
Yeah.
Intrigue.
Are we totally wrong? Tell us in the comments.
I'm sure you will.
I actually like this one from Ryan Beechnet, because it's a pretty common thing. Ryan asks just about the aches and pains that pro cyclists get. And I think, Ryan, they're probably pretty similar to the aches and pains that normal cyclists get.
Yeah.
They're just things like overuse injuries, so you might get IT band syndrome, I guess, is pretty common. Broken collarbones are, of course, pretty common.
You're pretty much not a cyclist until you've broken your collarbone, are you?
And then definitely like sore back, particularly lower back, because even, I'm sure pro cyclists are significantly better at conditioning now than, they reportedly were 10 or 15 years ago, but even the pros are maybe not the most flexible, don't have the strongest cores, and if you spend 5 or 6 hours on a bike, that will lead to a bit of pain.
Yep, and the human backside did not evolve to sit on a bike saddle, so I think most people who do a lot of riding get some kind of saddle pain. It's just part of the sport.
So they are cyclists just like you and I, and they experience the same pains that you and I would. I also, Emma, quite liked this one, which it says, is it legal for a teammate to grab onto your saddle? I know it wouldn't be seen, but can you? And that's from Yeo Paz.
As in getting a bit of help from the grabbing on.
So if you were really tired and you kind of thought, my teammate's there, I'll just grab onto the saddle and freewheel. I think, first of all, whether it's legal or not, and it probably isn't because it's receiving assistance.
Yeah, you're not allowed to get a push off a teammate either, technically, although it happens.
It's just a bit impractical, because if you're really tired and you can't ride your bike as fast as you want to anymore, and your teammate isn't, why would you grab onto their saddle and make them tired?
Yeah. You should be helping them win rather than getting help off them at that point. Yeah. So I think getting a push off a teammate is technically against the rules, any kind of assistance, but it clearly happens, and unless it's blatant, I think no no one calls them up, especially if, you know, a rider's dropped their chain or something in the bunch. I actually had pushes from people who weren't even teammates. They were rivals, but if I dropped a chain or something, they'd just give you a push to keep you going. That's sort of one of the unwritten, often broken rules, if you see what I mean, that's fine within reason.
Yeah, I'd agree, definitely. And on this one, we've got one from Jens de Stecker, who asks, how do you stay in the front of the peloton during a race or crit? That's
a very good question.
You battle, basically.
If anyone knows, let me know. Yeah, it's a big fight, basically.
Yeah. Got a lot of experience at staying at the back of the peloton, Jens, but that wasn't your question.
So I really struggled with this when I started racing because I was not great in the peloton. I'm still not. I couldn't really see where I was going because everyone was taller than me, and I felt like I was constantly being shoved backwards, and I couldn't work out how to stay at the front. And some people seem to do it so easily, normally when they've had a lot of experience and they've been racing since they were young, and they're just good at taking the little gaps. And then someone explained to me that you don't stay in the front. It's not like a static thing. Well, it is sometimes, but rarely. The peloton is a fluid body made up of cyclists, and that if you're not moving forwards, then you're moving backwards effectively. So they explained to me that you have to take every gap and keep moving forwards to stay in the front, which I was terrible at. So that's why I was always at the side of the bunch or at the back or on the front. So it is difficult, and some people are really good at it, and it's a real skill for road racing. And just keep taking the gaps and moving forward.
It's also not necessarily, like Emma kind of just alluded to, it's not necessarily energy kind of free or particularly energy saving. It requires a lot of focus, and also, which is quite draining over the course of a long race, and it also requires just a lot of pressing forward on the pedals to find those small gaps and keep moving up. You
basically have to be pretty brave to take the little gaps and nifty and a little bit assertive. And some people do make it look effortless, and for some people it requires less effort, but it's a real skill.
And I think Emma, although she just said she didn't stay at the front of the peloton, often got around that by staying off the front of the peloton.
No.
Occasionally.
Only when I was new in cycling and nobody knew who I was.
So we've got this one from Nathan, and I like this because Nathan's asking, can I use a commuter bike to participate in races? And it's a good question because most people might want to start racing or find out what it's all about, and they don't have a racing bike. To my knowledge, I'm not sure you can do that in road races, but I know that one place where you can pretty much rock up and use any bike you have, especially in the UK, are local cyclocross races. And they're great because they're off roads, so there's no traffic danger or anything like that. They're on grass, which is usually a soft landing. They're kind of cheap to enter, and you can just rock up on whichever bike you have and get started. And I think in most countries now, they, as well as having full complements of winter series of cyclocross races, they also have summer cyclocross races, so I just recommend checking out one of those. Yeah.
Or sportives, where you can often come along on a flat handlebar bike, and if your commuter bike has got drop handlebars and fits all the requirements of a road racing bike, then it should be fine. Just you have to be aware that most of those rules about bike design are for safety. So, you know, if your commuter bike is, and I hope your commuter bike is safe, but if the brakes don't work or the gears don't work, then it's not a great idea to try and race in a peloton of people. Make sure it's safe before you try and race on it. But yeah, there's no reason. A commuter bike is, you know, some people commute on really nice bikes.
Yeah, definitely.
I do. I get to use a Canyon, it's great.
Right, I think we should make this one of our last questions. It's from AM, who's asking, basically, at what cost does professional cycling and striving for improvement in physical endeavours come at? Do we think professional cyclists train too much, take it all too seriously, and at the end of it, it's just a bit lost? What do you reckon? It's quite a philosophical question, that.
Yeah, it's a deep question, and I think it depends on the person. I mean, I think in any professional sport or any job, you have to make sacrifices to try and be your best. So, obviously, sort of social and, you make choices in life, you can't do everything. And you know, some people push their bodies pretty hard, and it can be pretty knackering, I found.
Yeah, you know, I think most people who get into cycling or a sport do it because even if they've had a hard year and they may seem they're falling out of love with it, fundamentally love doing the activity. Yeah. So as long as you remember that, and that you also remember you like racing and continuously striving for improvement, as you say, it's probably going to be mentally and physically draining, but you're fortunate enough to do a sport professionally that you really like doing, and there are thousands of people who would be just head over heels to be in your position. So I think you're very lucky, even though it may not always feel that way. if you're training for 7 hours in the rain.
Yeah.
And then I think the physical cost thing is really depending on the person and whether they get it wrong.
Yeah, they're definitely. I mean, there is increasing evidence that like really high level sport and the kind of high performance sport is not actually as good for you as sort of gentle daily 30 minutes of exercise. But I think, you know, most professional athletes should be sensible enough to moderate their training in the off season and you know, when they retire, to keep doing exercise gently to keep them healthy and yeah, like Tom says, as long as you keep enjoying it, then it's a huge privilege, and it is a privilege to be able to be a professional athlete. So yeah, it's about keeping a positive mental attitude, I guess, and not letting yourself get too exhausted.
Definitely. I think I've actually really enjoyed the professional cycling questions this week.
Yeah.
What should we answer your questions about next week?
Yep. Give us a topic that you think would make a great topic for an ask.
And let us know your questions, rather, not comments. Comment with your questions down below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up too. While we're here, Emma, we should talk about our t-shirts. So
yes.
We are wearing our pink t-shirts made to celebrate everything that is great about cycling in the month of May. Mm-hmm. And you can find them in the GCN shop, which is shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com, and which will also be linked on screen. On screen as well is a link to subscribe to our channel, and we'll also throw a link up to our latest presenter challenge, which is our eBay Bike challenge, because we do want to hear which challenge you think we should do next.
Within reason.
Within reason.